The capital city rejoiced as Prince Arthas, destroyer of evil in Northrend, returned. The son has finally come to pay his respects to his father and take back up the mantle in defending the kingdom of Lordaeron. However, falling to the influence of Frostmourne, Arthas rose up and killed his own father, beginning what would be the destruction of the empire itself. The king, realizing far too late that he should have listened to the prophet Medivh. But what would have happened if King Tyrannus had heeded the warning of the prophet? Well, chances are high he would have been alive, and the Horde would have found themselves outmatched and subjugated even after they flee. In this episode, let's take a look at Warcraft lore. As a brief refresher, in Warcraft 3, Medivh had approached King Tyrannus to warn him that they must flee to Kalimdor. The king sent him away, telling him that he would not leave the lands, he would not allow his people to suffer. This fatal mistake resulted in the destruction of his empire and ultimately his death. But what if King Tyrannus had heeded the words? What if he had taken his people to Kalimdor? Well, in this scenario, he had heeded the words. However, there still were issues. The plague had already begun to take hold in the poisoned grain, and orc attacks were on the rise. Several small towns and cities were under siege or had become tainted. Before Medivh had even given his prophecy, the alliance had begun to fracture. With the announcement of the withdrawal, it is likely that the empire would have been destroyed. The races would have more than likely kept to their own kingdoms and areas, with a few opting to possibly follow the humans during the Exodus. The only race that would have plausibly stayed in droves would have been the majority of the half-elves, who preferred to be among humans anyway. The others would have gone it alone or formed their own alliances. The kingdom of Lordaeron had been broken. Even with this fracture, though, the kingdom of humans would have still had a vast amount of resources that they could pull upon. They would have been able to abandon the internment camps and recall their forces to the capital city to put up a line of defense while they began their own exodus. The orcs, being newly freed, would have impacted both sides. They had not yet been corrupted, so they would have caused issues for both the races and the plague. As they prepared to leave, the line of defense around the city would have been able to easily hold off the plague during these early stages. There was only one issue: Arthas. The alternate actions of this timeline would not have prevented Arthas from traveling to Northrend. He would have returned as corrupted as he was in the canon. This would also be the fatal flaw of his father. Not knowing that his son was corrupted, he would have welcomed Arthas back with open arms. At this point, it's hard to know what Arthas' next action would have been. In canon, the kingdom of Lordaeron was not prepared. It was caught with its armies dispersed and its leadership weak. However, in the alternate timeline, even with the death of the king, the armies would be formed and ready to fight. The generals prepared for anything to happen. It's also likely that Jaina Proudmoore would be leading the armies as well, assisting and there when Arthas did his coup. Again, it is hard to predict how Arthas would have proceeded, but the most likely thing to do would be to let the good king live and escape, focusing on building the undead army and taking over the land. He would still be serving Mal'Ganis and have to assist in reviving Kel'Thuzad. An attack on the Knights of the Silver Hand to get the urn would have been required. However, it is unlikely that Uther, his mentor, would have been there. The king was not dead, so the focus on the urn would not have existed, and Uther probably would have either been on the front lines or trying to get out as many civilians as possible. So retrieving the urn would not have been a big deal, at which point he would have been able to turn around and focus on Quel'Thulas. The undead in the alternate timeline would find themselves weaker than they were in the canon. The villagers that would have fed the undead army were gone, and resistance groups that formed post-destruction of the Alliance would have fled with the new human empire. This would mean that the undead would now focus more on the other races that were left on the continent. Ironically, this would make the humans the most dominant species in the new altered alliance that ultimately would form. However, the biggest change would occur in the politics and control of Kalimdor. The humans would make landfall on Kalimdor, and unlike in canon, the Empire would have a fully functioning military, competent leaders, and be the dominant threat. Thrall would still be gathering his forces and allies together, while the Alliance already had everything in place. Be sure to tune in for part 2, when a racist alliance attempts to subjugate and create internment camps for a weaker horde, on History Reloaded. What's up, everyone? I'm James with the History Reloaded. What you just saw is one of an infinite amount of scenarios that could have happened in Warcraft 3. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe. Part 2 will be coming out very, very shortly. And as always, make sure you tune in to see what the world could have been.